Officially, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Some of you looking back at me were with me last night around 8 p.m., and you know that I hadn't yet figured out what I was going to say today. And what most of you who were there do not know is that after Friday's absolutely epic karaoke night, I couldn't sleep. So I closed my eyes around 3:30 a.m. or so, and then I proceeded to toss and turn about every 10 minutes until it gave up, and I started my day at 7:30. Yeah. So last night, not only did I have no idea what I was going to say, but I was functioning only on caffeine, Ulf's cooking, massive quantities of sugar, and divine impulse. And here I stand before you today, neatly typed pages in hand, filled with today's talk. And when I went to bed last night, I made it in bed at 11. The pages made sense. Then, given my lack of sleep, it's entirely possible that no sense will be made today. But it felt like it was coming together perfectly. It felt like even the sleep-deprived version of me knows how to get out of the way and let the divine download happen unimpaired. Because what I noticed when I began typing is that Spirit doesn't seem to mind how I show up, only that I show up. Spirit doesn't require 8 hours of sleep or even 4, or a perfectly rested minister or a clear linear outline in order to speak. Simply, Spirit waits for us, patient and steady and centered until we're ready to listen. And last night, somewhere between the excitement and the exhaustion, somewhere between the sugar highs and the sugar crashes, a quiet whisper rose up. Step into the circle the medicine wheel is calling it. That whisper is what brings us here this morning. Long before the first church was built, long before the first scriptures were written, long before clocks and calendars and sermons, humanity watched the movement of the sun and moon and stars and understood something holy. Life does not move in straight lines. Life turns. It circles. It cycles, it spirals, it rises, it grows, it releases, it rests, and it rises again. Our indigenous siblings call this sacred pattern the medicine wheel, the circle of wholeness, of direction, of relationship, of becoming. And this morning we step into that circle together. The native people here teach that life itself is shaped like a circle. The sacred wheel that holds every season, every direction, every stage of our becoming, that medicine wheel is one of the oldest symbols on this continent. It teaches that everything belongs. The dawns and the dusks, the joys and the sorrows, the beginnings and the endings, the times when we felt centered and the times when we feel utterly lost. And the wheel teaches us something else. That no matter which direction you face, there is always a center. And that center is God. When you step into the medicine wheel, the first direction you face is the east. The place of sunrise, the place of illumination, the place where new beginnings break open the sky. Every tradition honors the East. Every path starts here because the East is that moment, that holy moment, when the light returns and something in us whispers, maybe I can begin again. Think about your own life. Think about the moments when something dawned on you, not because somebody told you, not because you read it in a book, but because some inner sun finally rose. The East is that fresh breath after you've been holding your lungs tight. It's the first honest conversation after months of emotional distance. It's that sudden clarity that helps you see your life in a new way. It is that spark of inspiration that comes at 2 a.m. or 10 p.m. after a long sleepless previous night when you're typing with 12 fingers and you're seeing through only half of one eye and none through the other. It's that moment when you realize, oh, this is who I really am. The East is the gift of insight, illumination, awakening. It is the direction of the spiritual wow. Okay, when the sun comes up, everything looks different, not because the world has changed, but because the light has changed. And we've all had those moments, those holy dawns, right? Those times when Spirit lifted the curtain just enough for us to see something that we couldn't before. Years ago, and I'm not going to tell you how many years ago, but let's just say I was a young teenager, and I remember waking up one morning after weeks of feeling stuck and kind of outside of everything, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, in every way. And for no dramatic reason at all, I opened my eyes and I felt just the tiniest shift. It wasn't a breakthrough, it was just that little whisper that said, you don't have to keep carrying this. That was the first time that realization hit me. It was like a sunrise in my chest. Nothing in my life had actually changed, but the light inside me had. And suddenly I could breathe again without feeling like I was going to cry. In the East, God often whispers, look again. There's more here than you realized. And then we turn to the South, where the East is a beautiful surprise moment, a sunrise glowing and soft and poetic. The South it's the part of life where you realize that illumination is not the same thing as mastery. And that's putting it gently. The South is this season of growth. It is warm and vibrant and sometimes chaotic and full of spiritual learning opportunities, which is a very polite way of saying that this is the part of the wheel where we try things and they don't always go as planned. Okay, the South is youth. It is becoming. It is the heart saying, I've totally got this. And the ego replying, yes, let's absolutely run here before we learn how to walk. Okay? Think of every time in your life when you were absolutely certain that you'd figured something major out. Right? Only to discover later that you had in fact figured one thing out, and approximately 12 new lessons sprouted immediately behind it, like spiritual dandelions blowing into your life. That is the South. It's the first time you tried to meditate and spent 12 minutes making your grocery list. Right? It's your earnest attempts to be patient right before losing your patience. It's promising yourself to just trust God and then giving God a very detailed list of exactly how you'd like things to unfold. It's saying, I'm surrendering, and then trying to supervise the surrender process. When I was about 21, I'm certain it was 21, my dad gave me my first copy of A Course in Miracles. I didn't have a class or a group to go to. I was living in LA in a horrible apartment. So I was reading it all by my lonesome, and he told me that if I really followed the course, it would change my life forever. The inscription read, "The greatest gift anyone can give you lies in these pages. Never part with this book." I haven't. "One day, perhaps when you least expect it, you will pick this up and begin the inevitable journey without distance to your truth." And then in parentheses, "You are going to be very surprised to find out who you really are." So I was taking it all very seriously. And I remember a time when I was trying very, very hard not to judge someone who continually frustrated me. I was silently chanting in my head while this person was in the room, "I release all judgment. I release all judgment," while simultaneously drafting a very strongly worded speech in my head as the undercurrent. That is the South. That is the trying and failing and trying again and maybe failing again. It's finding all the ways that it doesn't work and realizing that God doesn't require perfection, just participation. The South is the part of the wheel where we grow, not necessarily gracefully or quietly, but honestly. It is the season of learning by doing, learning by trying, learning by accidentally tripping over the same spiritual lesson 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 times. It's learning that vulnerability is not a flaw, but a doorway. And here's the beauty of the South. Growth, it can look messy. It can feel awkward, and it asks us to trust. It requires us to let our hearts stay open, even when we'd rather wrap them in bubble wrap and keep them safe on a shelf. But the medicine wheel teaches us that the South is not a punishment for being imperfect. It's an invitation into the holy work of becoming. Because the truth is, you cannot grow without stretching. And you cannot stretch without the tiniest bit of discomfort. And you cannot step into your fullness without a season when Spirit gently and lovingly and persistently says, "Okay, sweetheart, it is time to try again. You'll get this." The South reminds us that God does not expect perfection. God asks for participation, for willingness, for one more step on that path. And even when we stumble, especially when we stumble, Spirit leans in, smiling, saying, "There you go. Keep going. You're doing beautifully." And then we come to the West. The West is the direction of the setting sun. It's that moment when the world gets quiet and the colors deepen and the shadows stretch long across the ground. The West is beautiful and it is honest, because the West is where life stops asking us to grow and starts asking us to let go. It's where we face the things that we didn't plan for, we didn't ask for, we didn't see coming. Loss and change, disappointment, fear, grief, the unraveling of who we thought we were supposed to be. That role that we had designated to ourselves when somebody said, "Tell me about yourself." And in this direction of the wheel, we stop pretending that life is clean always or easy. We stop performing the spiritual version of being fine. We stop trying to outrun the shadows, and instead we turn toward them with courage. Because in the medicine wheel, the West, again, is not a punishment. It is not a failure. It is not proof that we did something wrong. The West is a doorway. It is a holy threshold. It's that place where shedding becomes sacred. This is the direction where life invites us to unclench our fists and release what is too heavy to carry, and to finally breathe in the honesty of everything we've been holding. And here in this vulnerable, quiet, truthful place, those words of Ernest Holmes meet us with great compassion. There is a place open for transcendence to flow in, and a new influx takes place. That's all experience does for us. All that pain, all that grief and sorrow, all that it can do is temporarily explode the pent-up energy and emotion and frustration that otherwise would burst the psychic cord. But the only release that finally comes is when the emotion is spent, and perhaps even in physical and mental weariness, though the exhaustion is so great that the tension relaxes and that other thing comes in. That other thing which always says peace, always, because it is peace. There was a season in my life where I was carrying a grief that I wouldn't admit to anyone. No one had any idea. I didn't even look at it much myself. I kept busy, and I kept smiling, and I kept functioning, and then one afternoon, I was sitting in my car in a parking lot that was adjacent to City Search where I was working, and everything just kind of cracked open. And not tears, because they don't come out of my eyes, the snot came without warning. I know it's gross, but that's true. My tear ducts drained that way, not that way. It felt like something that I'd been holding on to for months inside me had finally and blessedly let go. Nothing was fixed afterward, but something was softer. That's the West. It's not the place that we choose, but the place where spirit meets us when life becomes too heavy to hold on to alone. The West teaches us that it's okay to be tired. It's okay to admit that we hurt. It's okay to let things fall apart. That release is not collapse, it is grace. That endings are not punishment, they're passageways. The West says, come rest here. Come let the grief breathe. Come be human with me for a moment. Because once that storm of emotion is passed, once the tears or the snot have spoken their truth, once the heart has poured itself out, peace returns. Not because the world has changed, but because you made space for the presence that had actually never left you. The West is where we go to learn that letting go is not losing. Letting go is returning. Letting go is trusting that spirit will hold whatever we finally set down. Okay? And then we come to the North. If the South is warm and vibrant and the West is deep and shadowed, then the North is cool, clear, and steady. Like that first deep breath when the storm finally passes, when the world smells washed and new, that rainstorm smell. The North is the direction of clarity, of wisdom, and of integration. It's the place where the lessons of the East, the South, and the West settle into the bones and become understanding. This is not the naive clarity of the East. This is that, oh, wow clarity. This is that quiet clarity that comes after the valley. Okay, after the growth, after the release, after the truth telling, after the tears. I'm not going to say it again. In the North, you see differently because you are different. The North is elderhood, not elderhood by age, but by experience. It's the wisdom that comes when you realize that you survived the things that you thought would break you, that you grew through things that you didn't feel ready for, that you released things that you once believed you needed. Be with that for a second. There's a great deal we think we need. We truly don't. It's that wisdom when you come to realize that God never left you and that your own soul has a voice worth listening to. The North is the place where your life begins to tell you that truth about who you really are. You see the terrain you walked, and suddenly the path makes sense. You look at the closed doors of the West and you understand why they had to close. You look at the messy growth of the South and maybe you laugh just a tiny bit at how earnestly you tried to control everything. Control is an illusion, folks. You look at the dawns of the East and realize how many more dawns there still are. The North is that place where perspective returns and the holy gift of seeing the whole wheel at once. And in this cool, clear direction, Spirit often speaks with a voice that is quieter, but somehow still stronger. And it says, you're okay, you're growing, you're learning, you're on your path, and I'm here. And I tried to come up with a parallel for this because it's very hard to explain the wheel without becoming terribly boring. And I sat and I remembered a time when my oldest son, Joey, was about 3. I had spent several years prior to his birth and those 3 following just trying my hardest to make things work in other areas of my life and still finding myself settling or compromising uncomfortably and largely just failing in general. And I desperately wanted to force happiness into my life while holding on to my life as it was. Because we, silly humans, we cling to that discomfort we know out of fear rather than reaching towards something unknown. And there was a moment after a long stretch of struggle when I suddenly understood, not in my head, but deep inside me, in my bones, that certain doors would have to close, that certain paths had ended. It wasn't painful or sad, it was clear. Anybody been there? When the thing that you thought would shake you suddenly was calming? It's like cool days after many days of heat, right? That was the North. It was the direction that lets life finally make sense. The North teaches us that wisdom isn't loud. Wisdom doesn't scold. It doesn't shame. It doesn't rush. Wisdom breathes. It watches. It waits until the heart is ready to hear. And then wisdom whispers to you to walk on. It is a comfort. The North is the inner alignment that rises after that emotional release of the West. It is what dawns in you after the tears have dried. It is that new steadiness that comes when your life is finally quiet enough for clarity to speak. In the North, you stand on the wheel and you realize that you have survived every direction. And you've more than survived. You have been shaped and softened and strengthened and deepened by the journey. The North is where we integrate our becoming, where we claim our wisdom, and we remember that presence was with us in every single step we took, even the steps that we stumbled through. And when we're ready, when we're really, really ready, like I was in that moment, when we're ready to let this wisdom guide us, the wheel turns us back toward the center. And then, after we have faced the dawn of the east and the stretching of the south and the releasing of the west and the clarity of the north, that wheel turns us inward, because every direction, every season, every lesson, every joy, every sorrow, all of it, every one of those has been leading us here to that center. The center is that still point where movement stops and presence begins. It is the quiet heartbeat beneath all experience. It is that calm that's hard to find sometimes, that's beneath all that chaos. The peace beneath the pain. It's the truth beneath the story. It is the one life, unmoving, unchanging, undaunted, undivided. It is that place where the illusion of separation dissolves and we remember what our soul has never forgotten. That God is not at the edge of your life outside of you. God is found at the center of your life within you. And this is where our scripture for today rises up to meet us, not as a reading, but as a recognition. That is Acts 17:24 through 29. For the God who made the world and all things therein, and who is the Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands. Neither is he ministered to by human hands, nor is he in need of anything, for it is he who gave life and breath to all. He has made of one blood all nations of men to dwell on all the face of the earth. And he has appointed seasons by his command, and he has set limits on their days so that they should seek and search after God and find him by means of his creations, because he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of you, your own wise men have said, for we are his kindred. This is the center of the wheel. We live in God. We move in God. We have our being in God. We breathe because God is breathing us. We grow because God is growing us. We release because God is holding us. We learn because God is guiding us. And we survive because God is sustaining us. The east, the south, the west, the north, they are not four different journeys. God is revealing itself in the one journey of your becoming. Every direction leads back to God. Every season draws you toward it. Every lesson you've ever lived has been part of your return to the presence that could never leave you. And if you have ever wondered where God is, he's here, in the center of the wheel of your life, in that quiet place where your soul exhales and it remembers, I've never been separate, not for one moment, not for one breath. You have been walking that wheel, the dawn, the growth, the release, the wisdom, and then you stand where you begin, only deeper, softer, and stronger, and wiser. These pages always stick, don't they? So, let the medicine wheel teach you this, that no matter where you stand in your life, in joy or confusion, in grief, in growth, in wisdom, you are never outside of God. Your direction may change, your season may shift, your life may turn, but the center remains steady, still, loving, awake, alive, holding you in every step that you take. Return to the center. It doesn't matter which direction you are facing, return to the center again and again. Return to the God in whom you live, in whom you move, in whom you have your being. And may the wheel of your life keep turning you gently and lovingly and endlessly back into the one, this which has been our home all along. Thank you.